Hello there and welcome to Existential Sunday. My name is Corey. If you are new to an Existential Sunday, like meaning you've never watched one before, welcome. Like I said, my name's Corey. I'm a husband, I'm a father, a speaker, a writer. I host a podcast that this Existential Sunday is an extension of. If you are watching this later on the replay, hello to you also. You can feel free on the replay to add your comments and say hello to let me know that you were here, and I'll come by and say hello to you also. If you're coming in live right now and you are typing a good morning in the section, in the comment section, hello to you also. I will come back through when I'm done talking so that I can acknowledge you and say hello to you also. Just can't do it now because there's too much in my head. Way too much in my head. It's been a hell of a week to be Black. Before I get into all of that, I want to say a couple of things up front, especially to those of you who are new to Existential. This is a space where we talk about justice, faith, and culture, and we talk about those things from a deconstructed, decolonized space. So this is not a space that's like a church or a Bible study where I present you all the right answers. I don't have all the right answers. I'm wrestling with a bunch of stuff, bunch of realities, trying to contend for a better world through these talks and conversations that I have here. So, and same with the podcast. So that's what you have stumbled into or someone has shared with you if you're watching this and we don't know each other. Also, really briefly, let me acknowledge the elephant in the room for those of you who've been a part of these before. This thing on my face, the elephant on my face, I didn't lose a bet. Okay, I'm just going to leave it at that. I did not lose a bet. I just want to do something different. As I said, it's been a hell of a week for Black folks, and I want to acknowledge and just say that my thoughts and my prayers and any good energy, any comforting energy that I can put out there is going towards the family of Chadwick Boseman, our Black Panther that passed away a couple days ago. And sadly, I know many of you who are watching this, you heard about that and you saw that. And it's sad. It's like more just sadness and grief that has been 2020. Also, I mean, while I'm there in 2020, people who've lost their homes to wildfires in California and the massive hurricane that swept Louisiana. And I'm reading that there's like a meteor that's headed towards the earth right now that like they don't think is going to hit us. I mean, can I just say how like non-comforting it is to hear from scientists, we don't think it's going to hit us. It's probably not going to. Anyway, it's supposed to be like around the elections, that there's like a meteor that's coming towards the Earth, which would be a classic 2020 move that a meteor hits us also. But I do want to like move into, let me get to what I'm here to talk about because I don't want to bore you and have you looking at me like, get to the point, Corey. I'm getting there. There is a reason that I've discovered why whenever I do Existential Sunday or Existential on my podcast, why I have started saying that I come from the Christian tradition. And I think a part of the reason I voice my affiliation with Christianity that way is because there's a large part of me that's embarrassed by what I see from Christians so often. In fact, I've had people ask me if I was still a Christian, which is an interesting question. Because ultimately, who gets to determine that? I guess that's a conversation for another day. I'm going to stay away from it. But I voice things the way I do because I look around at people from the tradition that I come from. I went to a Christian school. I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was a pastor. I look around at the people that are professing to be Christians, and I'm like, I don't know what the hell you believe in. I don't know where your faith is grounded. And one of the things that I saw that made me feel this way earlier this week was there was an article I saw, a couple people have shared, that Kyle Rittenhouse, and for those of you who don't know who Kyle Rittenhouse is a 17-year-old terrorist who from Wisconsin who went to a Black Lives Matter demonstration in Kenosha, where he doesn't live. He came over from some other part of the state with an assault rifle that he was too young to carry, walked past police carrying this assault rifle, And ultimately, before the night was done, had injured several people and murdered 2 people at this rally. He's claiming it's self-defense, but this is what happened. And I saw and that's, that's egregious enough, right? That happened. But what I saw that compounded it, and what always compounds it for me, and what always throws me into a deeper state of despair, anger, or whatever else you call it, is how Christians respond. There was a group of Christians who got together to raise almost $100,000. By now, it's probably over $100,000 to support Kyle Rittenhouse. And when I saw that, I just was like, I don't even know what to make of the soul of American Christianity, if there is a soul. I mean, I even saying soul like that, I think there should be some sort of collective sense, because the Christian faith is supposed to be one about community and better communities, and communities that care for and love one another. But a person who murders 2 people in cold blood is getting support. Meanwhile, the person that started all of this, well, I shouldn't say started all of this, people who started all this were the Kenosha Police Department, who shot Jacob Blake 7 times in the back in front of his wife, or his fiance, and his 3 small children. I believe it's 3 small children. However many children, they were in the back seat. So can I just, before I even get to the point of this whole thing, can I just say about that, how inhumane it is that if you walk up on, if you're a police officer, you're an officer of peace, you're a person doing public service, and you walk up to a family, you see little kids in the back seat, should you not try to de-escalate a situation like that? Shouldn't pulling a gun out, a taser, any sort of weapon of violence be the last thing that you do in front of somebody's children, if you actually view that person that you're encountering as a human being? Does that not make sense that you'd go, oh, he's got kids with him? Even if he drives away, he's not wanted for some violent crime. If he drives away, you got his license plate, go find him later when his kids aren't around. You shot him 7 times in the back. And I watched Christians come forward to say, I literally saw this. And I don't even have to probably tell some of you what I saw. That literally saw people saying he should have followed the orders of the police. And now Jacob Blake is paralyzed from the waist down and handcuffed to a bed. And Christians are raising over $100,000 for Kyle Rittenhouse. Now, I want to try to make some sense of this, why I believe Christians are doing this, even though a lot of Christians don't even know why they are. Now, and those of you that are watching, you're 8 minutes in, you're watching this for the first time, I don't normally talk this much about Christians or necessarily. At least I don't think I do. And let me just give you a little bit of background, right? So all of this for the Christian faith begins thousands of years ago in a desert post-slavery. In this desert, where these liberated slaves are now living, they have connected to their ancestors who went out into the desert, ironically enough, to start a new life, following a voice, a God who could not be seen during a time where that was considered preposterous. It was considered crazy. Everyone's gods were represented by some sort of idol, some sort of statue, some sort of something. And most nations around this time had multiple gods that they believed in. So these Hebrew people, these people wandering in the wilderness, had started to build a civilization, build a way of being around the idea that they were following and believing in the one true God who wanted them to act distinctively from the nations around them. So if the Moabites had a sexual ethic, the Jewish people's sexual ethic needed to be different from them so that they could be distinct from them. If the Canaanites ate shellfish, that the Jews needed to not eat shellfish shellfish so that they could be distinct from them. A lot of the things that you see like in the First Testament and the laws that come out of the what's called the Torah, those things are not necessarily about something that God was asking of these, or at least what they thought God was asking them of them to be holy as much as it was to be different, or to preserve a way of being and living that showed that they were connected to this one true God. And they were very serious about that. And they believed that if anything adverse happened, if there was a plague, if there was a famine, if their crops didn't grow, whatever it was, that these things were because they had started living like the people around them, like the way of life that was supposed to be precious, that they had started to allow outside influences to affect the way that they were living. And so as a result of that, bad stuff would happen. And as an example, there's a story in Numbers, I think it's Numbers 25, where there's the Israelites are experiencing this plague, and the plague is believed to be because a lot of their men were sleeping with Moabite women, which was against their sexual ethic and against their codes. And one day, this guy brings his Moabite woman into their community in front of everybody, takes her into his tent. One of Aaron's sons, Aaron is a priest in this time. He's in charge of the sort of religious activities of the tribe. Aaron's son sees this happen, and he gets angry. He gets a spear, goes to the tent where this Moabite woman and this guy were having adult time, and he took a spear and killed both of them in the act. And this is where the story gets really interesting, because according to what's written in Numbers and in later on in one of the Psalms, Phinehas is a hero. Phinehas is actually declared righteous, and God comes on the scene and says, Phinehas, you're my guy because of what you've done. Your zeal matches my zeal, and this is the way I want you to live. It's like there's this virtue attached to what drove Phinehas to go and take a spear and kill these people, because Phinehas felt as if the way of life that he believed, was indoctrinated to believe, was how they were supposed to live, was being threatened by this person living in a different way. By the man bringing a Moabite woman, he thought our way of life, our collective national identity, our collective national attachment to God is threatened by this different thing that is happening. And so he killed this man, and apparently, as the story goes, God applauded it. And this is where this whole idea of zeal comes from. And this where you see throughout the rest of the Bible, this word zeal, it comes from that sort of like, there is something in me that rises up to be zealous, which is a term of violence, really, where I become violent when I see that the way I believe life should be lived, the way I believe I can make God and nation happy, is being violated. This zeal rises up in me, and I'm willing to commit violence in order to preserve the way of being that I think is right. And Paul talks about this when he's describing how he was when Saul was Saul before he became Paul. I'm sorry for those of you that don't know the Bible story, you can look it up later. When Saul converted to being Paul wrote about Saul, describing that he was zealous for the Jewish way of life, for the way of life that he understood, the religion he understood, the way of being that he understood. And he thought that this Jesus character, this brown-skinned Palestinian who had supposedly been raised from the dead, threatened that. And so his zeal caused him to go around and persecute and kill followers of Jesus. All that being said, what does it have to do with us today? Kyle Rittenhouse believed, if you listen to what he said and what I've seen reported about him, was that Kyle is a patriot. Kyle considers himself to be preserving and protecting the American way from this uprising that is threatening that. And something in the not all Christians, because certainly I still consider myself to be one, and I abhor what Kyle Rittenhouse did. But something in a collective sense of white evangelicalism, identifies with what Kyle did and says, yeah, we have another Phineas. We have another zealot who is so passionate about the way of being in America that we all love that he was willing to take action. Somehow, and I've talked about this before, you can watch other videos, somehow the reality that nationalism and the Christian faith have somehow conflated with one another has Christians believing that patriotism and allegiance to an American way of being is synonymous with following Jesus. And so anyone who threatens the flag threatens Jesus. And so any action that's taken to defend Jesus from people who are trying to what they perceive to be trying to ruin that, it's whatever happens to those people just happens to those people. And the two people who were murdered by Kyle Rittenhouse are just collateral damage from the zeal of nationalistic Christianity. I need to drink water because I'm feeling myself like really getting worked up. I think that zeal, that preservation of the way of life that I'm accustomed to or that I believe in is the reason why in 2016 evangelicals were so responsible for what we have in the White House now. Let me not be disrespectful, for who we have in the White House now. Because this person we have in the White House now showed up and he used language that described the world, described America in a way that made it sound as if we were under attack. Our way of living needed to be protected and preserved, and that the Phineas-like thing to do would be to vote for him so that he could keep the Mexicans out, the Muslims out. Now he's claiming to preserve the suburban way of life where we won't allow Black and brown people, code word for low-income housing, to come and live near you. I'm going to preserve your way of life. Kyle Rittenhouse said, I'm going to show up and preserve the way of life. I'm going to protect the American way of living from the Black lives moving forward. The Black Lives Matter movement, the movement for Black lives. I'm going to protect America from that. And the irony, the hypocrisy actually, is that Christians said of the Black Lives Matter movement that they were rioters and they were violent. They were destroying property. And how could they destroy property? I have not seen the story of Black folks killing people with assault rifles at these demonstrations. But because they were destroying property and cars and burning buildings, these people were rioters and they were evil and they were all these other things. They were thugs and animals and blah, 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 blah. Even though they were reacting to some tragedy that actually happened in their communities, in our communities, on the flip side, Christians are supporting a murderer, a terrorist. And this is all I'm asking. I don't even know that I'm at a point in my life where I'm going to ask for Christians to condemn all violence. Because if you are a person who just sort of does like casual reading of the Bible and you're not like really don't do a lot of scholarly study and reading and all that kind of stuff, and you just sort of casually read it, you could arrive at a place where there is some violence that is certainly condoned, if not all out called for by God. So if you're a Christian and you're like, well, you know what? There is this guy Phineas who God props up and says, because of your zeal, yay, Phineas. I mean, if you're a Christian who says there's a time where violence is appropriate, fine. Be consistent. Don't look at Black folks, even though, again, we know that agents provocateurs show up to Black Lives Matter demonstrations all the time and commit violence just to cause that to be the narrative. But I have seen with my own eyes, I've seen Black folks committing violence. I've seen at some of these demonstrations, at least what I saw on television. So if you're going to be a person who condemns the violence that happens at these demonstrations, you cannot turn around and then say, but this violence is okay, unless you are telling me that you're more committed to your tribe than you are actually to following the brown-skinned Palestinian Jewish rabbi that the faith, the Christian faith, is supposed to be founded on. Like, you got to do one or the other. You can't come forward and say that I'm a Christian and therefore I condemn the violence of the Black Lives Matter movement, but then say this kid who murdered in cold blood on purpose 2 people deserves our $100,000+ support. You're going to have to pick a side. You're going to have to decide okay, well, this is what the Bible says. And again, I think that's let me be very clear about this. I told you guys, maybe I didn't tell you, but I meant to tell you that there's going to be a lot of stuff swirling in my head. And if I say something that you have questions about, feel free to hit me in the comments with questions. I'm about to debate you in the comments. But if you got a question about something that I said and you want to understand what I meant by what I said, I will reply in the comments below. But let me be very clear about this. Reading violence and God being an advocate of violence into the Bible, I personally believe is a bad reading of it. I personally believe it is it's a flawed way of viewing what's written in the Bible, which is a whole other conversation for another day. But the point being that if you are a person who looks and certainly if your person considers yourself to be an advocate of nonviolence, like a follower of Jesus, following Jesus is certainly a followership of nonviolence, because the way we saw Jesus resisting and standing up to injustice was always in a nonviolent way, so much so that the most ultimate act of his nonviolence was him dying himself, him being executed by the state, rather than, as the scriptures say, he could have called angels down to rescue himself, or maybe that's an old Christian song. I don't really remember which one at this point. But rather than rescuing himself, he subjected himself to punishment. That's the ultimate act of nonviolence. I'm not going to fight you back. One of the disciples, Peter, cuts the ear off of a dude who comes to take Jesus, and Jesus is like, put your knife, your sword away, and heals the man who's trying to come take him. So there's no more nonviolent stance than that. If you are following that person, I don't understand $100,000 support of a murderer, unless what you're actually following is the supremacy of white people, and white people being able to create the standard of living that you need to violently protect by any means necessary. So it's so funny to me how many white Christians really do align with Malcolm X by any means necessary. This is what we're seeing right now. When Malcolm X said it, it was awful, horrible. How could you ever talk about a person who was an advocate of violence when what Malcolm X was actually an advocate of was self-defense? Okay, Corey, calm down. Let me bring the plane home. Okay, let me land the plane and shift gears to something else I said earlier this week. I'm done with that whole thing. If you got questions about what I just said, you can ask me in the comments. I just found myself really gassed up about that whole situation, and really, to be honest, you should be too. I personally think that if you are a person who's in pursuit of, my good friend Rolando Lamb told me yesterday that human decency is subjective. I wholeheartedly believe in that. I have other friends who consistently challenge me on binary thinking, and I am trying to hold non-binary thinking along with the way I've grown up learning and thinking about the world. But this idea that human decency is subjective, I understand that. So I'm not going to say that everybody should be outraged by what's happening. But my point is that there is something, I think, about the way that the things that we claim to be about, that we should be consistent in that as much as we can. No person is without hypocrisy, myself included. No human being is without hypocrisy. But I just think that when we are striving to work out the things we believe, there should be a way of arranging our thoughts and our way of being that is mindful of the other. And in being mindful of the other, I think we can look out at the world and see that a man was shot 7 times in front of his family and be able to, at least I believe, be able to go, there's something not right with that. There's something broken about that. And days later, a 17-year-old with a rifle that he has no business owning, walked past several police before ultimately killing 2 people. I think we should be able to look at that and go, if we're being intellectually honest, there's something not right. There's something inconsistent with that. And why is that the case? Which brings me to the last thing I want to say. I'm done. If you're a person who is not a Christian, this last 5 minutes or so may be totally boring to you. I don't know. So thank you for watching. If you're a non-Christian, you're like, I don't want to hear him talk to Christians about church, because I'm about to talk about church for the next 5 minutes. So if you're a person who doesn't go to church, don't care about church, cool. Thank you for stopping by. Grace and peace till next time. Those of you who are still connected to church or church people or whatever, earlier this week I said many of you should boycott your churches. And here's what I mean when I say that. Earlier this week, I watched the NBA and MLB, and Megan, I forget her last name, the tennis player, Osaka, decided not to play games to stand in solidarity with the movement for Black lives. And I thought it was a powerful statement. And when I saw it happen, I thought to myself, you know what? There's a lot of Christians who need to boycott their churches. So I put it out there and said Christians need to boycott their churches. And I'm sure that some people are upset by that, but it is what it is, especially, probably some pastors who are upset by that. After George Floyd, I've told you guys this before, I had a lot of activity of people wanting to talk to me about Christianity and race. And churches were moving into their series on race. And some churches did a full series. Some churches pulled up short because they got a lot of pushback from wealthy white racist donors. But I find myself now thinking that until your church is willing to advocate within their community for Black lives, you shouldn't put another dime in the offering bucket. You shouldn't commit another time, another hour, another minute to volunteerism. If you're part of a denomination that is not actively engaged in the dismantling of white supremacy, and let me add this caveat, and you are a person for whom that deeply matters, stop going to that church in any way. You shouldn't be there. You continuing to put your money and time and effort into that church that's not consistent with what you actually believe. I don't know how you do that. I guess maybe that's too strong. I mean, I really do mean that when I say maybe that's too strong, but I just don't know how you yourself can be an advocate for something and feel so deeply passionate about something and watch people being shot, watch a man be paralyzed from the waist down, potentially never run around with his kids again. For him to, for the rest of his life, be in a wheelchair, and his children, every time they see that wheelchair, every time they see the handicap sticker in the window if they're driving around, to be reminded of why. If you're a person that moves you and you're deeply concerned about that, and you're a part of a religious institution that's not doing shit about it, I just don't understand that. So some of you who even work for churches, you need to be having some serious conversations with your family at home about, you know what, mom or dad or might need to find another job. I think we've reached that point. I think we've reached a point where it's not like, oh, well, my church did a series. So what? What else? What else is your church actually doing on a consistent basis? Are they consistently talking about this? Are they consistently getting up in the pulpits, or now for most churches online? Are they consistently online in your face talking to you about how you can be involved in anti-racism? Are they pointing you to anti-racism materials? Are they giving you content? Are they allowing you to wrestle with your own beliefs about America and the social arrangement that we have between those with power and those who don't? Are they consistently doing that for you? If not, I'm not sure what you're doing there. If you have a church that's large enough and there's a bunch of resources flowing through there, and they have a lot of these churches in America have massive buildings. What I'm seeing happening with the NBA is that the players demanded that their owners open up the venues so that people could vote. Is your church doing that? Have they looked into that? Has your church approached the local police department to express that they would like to spend some time making sure that their local police departments are policing and dealing with people of color in a way that preserves their dignity and honor? If you're part of a church that's not doing those things, or maybe you just don't know, maybe you need to ask them, but you're part of a church that's not doing anything, like when you say, hey, what are you doing about it? Especially the white evangelical churches, even black churches, though. Some of you go to black churches where you need to be asking the same question of the black clergy who you sit and listen to preach, and you go, hey, what are we doing about this? What are you, because I think if you don't know, I mean, yeah, ask, but I think if you don't know, that's also a signal, because if you don't know, that means they're not telling you, which means there's nothing to tell. I think we need to demand better of our institutions. And those of us who come from the Christian tradition, starting with the church that you go to, you need to demand better of them. People are dying in the streets over this, here in America. And I know there's a bunch of other stuff going on. I'm not going to play Justice Olympics right now and go, well, there's this and there's this. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. There's a lot of stuff happening. This thing right here in front of us that we see every single day deserves our attention, deserves the attention of your church. And if your church won't give it the attention it needs, you need to go. Well, if you watched this for 31 minutes, almost 32 minutes, thank you. This is a longer one. If you're watching the replay and you watch this long, perhaps you watch it this long because you feel like there's something to it for you, and maybe you want to share this with your friends and your family. Feel free to do so. If you are not a part of our Patreon community, I'm so thankful for that community of people that's coming together to contend for a better world. I want to encourage you to join. The link to that will be in is in the comments below. At least should be. I think Julie's putting it in there. Hey, babe. And if that's you'd like to be a part of that community, feel free to do so. If you don't, oh well. But thank you guys so much for watching this. I really do appreciate all of you. Many of you reach out to me and ask me from time to time how I'm doing. I appreciate that, you asking, and appreciate. I also certainly appreciate that the allies in this space, whatever we call the white folks that are trying their best to come alongside of Black folks in our movement for dignity and peace and justice, that you aren't burdening me and your Black brothers and sisters with your guilt. You're not burdening us with your questions. You're offering gifts. You're offering condolences. You're offering prayers. Thank you. That being said, grace and peace.